I used to think that the worst moment of my life was when my wife woke up. I couldn't remember who I was, but I was wrong. That wasn't the worst. The worst moment of my life happened today, and I still don't know how to process it. 3 months ago, my wife Cynthia and I were hiking on a trail about 30 miles outside of Albion. She slipped near the ridge overlook and fell nearly 20 feet onto a jagged outcropping below. I had no feasible way of reaching her, so I did what any rational person would do in that situation. I scrambled downhill to get somewhere that had service and called 911. By the time paramedics finally arrived, she was unconscious and bleeding profusely from the side of her head. I must have waited in the hospital lobby for what felt like an eternity. Seconds crawled by like hours, weighed down by immense anxiety and uncertainty. When the medical staff finally informed me of her condition, they explained that it was nothing short of a miracle that her injuries weren't far worse. Her guardian angel was looking out for her, were the doctor's exact words. He urged me to remain cautiously optimistic about her recovery, but even that warning paled in comparison to the emotional anguish that followed. It was a long while before Cynthia finally had the strength to look at me, and when she did, her eyes were void of any trace of recognition. "Do I know you?" she asked. I didn't respond. The question felt like it had come from another life. According to the neurologists, cases of retrograde amnesia were rarely straightforward. I was physically there when they relayed concepts such as emotional instability and drastic shifts in personality, but mentally, I was elsewhere. I was warned that by the time she came home, the love of my life might no longer be the person I remembered. It was a lot to take it all at once, and I broke down many times after the news had long been delivered to me. In the days that followed, family members, friends and co-workers alike all stopped by to see how well she was doing. While they were all focused on lifting Cynthia's spirits, I threw myself headlong down a rabbit hole of research, desperate to learn anything and everything that could help me with her recovery efforts once she was discharged. I spoke with a wide range of specialists and read articles late into the night, desperate to retain anything that could help Cynthia return to normalcy. The day I finally bring her home couldn't come fast enough, but when it did, I was overwhelmed with relief. I could free her from the confines of her hospital room and give her a much-needed change of scenery. On the drive back to our home, I couldn't help but wonder if it were possible for us to reclaim even a sliver of the life we had shared together before the accident. Her adjustment to life back at the house was a gradual process, but even with the accommodations I had made for her, changes were still noticeable. For starters, while she was able to remember my name, she started sleeping on the opposite side of the bed instead of next to me. I couldn't necessarily blame her for that. My name might have been familiar, but that alone didn't make me any less of a stranger. Another change I noticed was her newfound hatred for coffee. Cynthia said that it was disgusting. I was crushed when she said that, because I had made it the way I remembered her liking it. She had been an avid consumer for years and refused to start any morning without it. What was once a morning ritual had now become yet another absence in our house. I poured the pot of coffee down the sink and never met another cup after that. Additionally, she forgot our address and even called our dog Sammy on multiple occasions, even though her name was Zilda. For context, we've had Zilda for 7 years, and not once has she ever growled or beaten anyone. That is, until Cynthia came home. It wasn't hard enough to draw blood, but it was enough to send a message. When I heard her scream in pain, I immediately asked her what had happened. She insisted that all she had done was try to pet Zelda. She kept accusing Zelda of being out of control and that she needed to go. But she had never behaved like this. Ever. The entire time I talked to Cynthia about this, Zelda growled from the floor of the adjacent room. Even when I called her name to knock it off, she didn't look at me. The whole situation was bizarre, but I attributed that to Zelda getting used to Cynthia being back home. Anything else meant a truth that I couldn't carry. Later that night, I went downstairs to find her sitting at the kitchen table with all the lights on. What was most peculiar was how haphazardly dozens of priceless photos, ranging from our wedding to family holidays, were strewn about. She looked like a college student cramming for an exam the night before. "What are you doing?" I asked, shielding my eyes from the kitchen lights. "It's 2 in the morning, you had me worried." She looked up when I entered the room and quickly shut one of the albums. "Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I'm just trying my best to remember everything." I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. "Don't apologize. I'll help you remember everything. I'm here every step of the way." She placed a hand over mine, but didn't look away from the photos. I stayed downstairs with her a little longer, reminiscing about how things used to be before leading her back to our bedroom, and finally calling it a night. Over the following weeks, Cynthia began to remember small details of our life. Birthdays, our anniversary, favorite foods, even the names of family members. She even corrected me about a detail regarding our Disney World itinerary from a long few years ago that I was sure she had forgotten. We were snuggling up in a bed watching a movie together one evening when she nuzzled her head against my chest. "I think I'm starting to remember a certain feeling." I turned my attention away from the movie to look at her. "What do you mean, dear?" She smiled warmly and looked up at me with her sapphire blue eyes. "What it's like being in your arms." Her words warmed my heart, and we embraced lovingly. I was elated to see that things were seemingly improving. I had remained hopeful that after all this time she would pull through, but despite the progress she had made, everything about it was undone. The moment I arrived home from work today, I walked through the front door and found Cynthia sitting on the couch watching TV. That wasn't the problem. The problem was what she was eating. I stared at the leftover Thai takeout container that she was scooping food out of. Spicy BB noodles. I felt a cheap creep up my spine. Peanut butter. That wasn't possible. She couldn't have eaten my leftovers. Cynthia had a severe peanut allergy, the kind where any form of exposure could send her into anaphylactic shock and kill her in minutes. So how was she consuming it by the spoonful? Cynthia noticed me staring. "Why are you looking at me like that? Is everything okay, honey?" She sounded genuinely confused, but I wasn't. You can't eat that." My hands trembled with rage and sadness. She set the container down on the coffee table in front of her slowly. "Jason, baby, what are you talking about? Of course I can." I watched her get up from her place on the couch and approach me. Before she could offer any reassurance, I pulled away and retreated up the stairs toward our bedroom. She hasn't come upstairs since everything happened. I think she's still watching TV downstairs. I'm not going to go down there, regardless of whether she's waiting for me to come talk to her. I'm not even going to entertain that idea. Everything I thought I knew about her has been ruined. I don't know what to do or what to think right now. The only thing on my mind right now is that whoever is downstairs right now, that's not my wife. Hey, I always been big into camping and the outdoors. Going camping with my father about once a month since I was 6. Anyway, I recently turned 19 and passed my driving test, finally, and decided it was time for my first solo camping trip. Just as a note, I live in a small country, so there are barely any stories about Bigfoot, skinwalkers, Wendigos, etc. Naturally, I grew up skeptical, since no one around me had many creepy encounters. Anyway, I decided to go camping in the mountain range in the southeast of the country, a beautiful part of the country. It was about a 3.5 hour drive to the car park I had marked on Google Maps. When I got there, I unpacked my gear and began to hike up the mountains to find a place with a beautiful view to set up camp. For context, I arrived at the car park around 4:30 p.m., so it was still light outside when I began hiking. Eventually, after hiking until around 8:39 p.m., I found a beautiful spot just off the trail. Keep in mind, I had only seen 4 other people during the entire hike, and there were 2 couples already heading back toward the car park. Naturally, I assumed no one else would still be up on the mountain that late. I had my camp fully set up around 9:30 p.m. and started collecting firewood, mostly thin sticks, but anything dry would do. After lighting the fire, I cooked myself a burger and sat there reading for a while. About 45 minutes later, the sun had completely gone down, so I decided it was time to crack open the beers I brought with me. After 4 or 5 beers, I started feeling pretty tired. I climbed into my tent and kept reading under the light of my headlamp for a while longer. At some point I drifted off to sleep. I can't remember exactly what it was, maybe around 10:30 or 11. Then I woke up, middle of the night, drenched in sweat. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was trying to break out of my chest. I had never felt fear like that before. Not normal fear either, pure dread. Like every instinct in my body was screaming that something was wrong. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself I was just paranoid because it was my first solo camping trip. That's when I heard it. My father's voice. What the hell? Hey, just thought I'd come out and check on you. Every hair on my body stood up instantly. There was absolutely no way my father was there. By this point, I was completely petrified and had zero intention of answering whatever that scene was or leaving the tent. Then it spoke again. How about you come out your tent and talk to me? Damn it, it could see the tent. A few seconds later, I heard something even worse. Dragging, a slow, heavy dragging sound moving through the brush. It sounded almost like someone pulling their body across the ground. I was shaking uncontrollably as I listened to it get closer and closer and closer, until I was certain it had stopped directly behind my head on the other side of the tent wall. I genuinely thought I was going to die there. At some point, I must have passed out from pure terror. When I woke up, it was around 7:30 a.m. For a second, I almost convinced myself the whole thing had just been some horrible nightmare. Then I looked down toward the bottom of the tent. It was open, completely open. And then I noticed something else, scratches all over my legs. My stomach dropped. Whatever had been outside had gotten into the tent. I practically exploded out of the sleeping bag, threw open the tent flap and started searching around in a panic. Then I went behind the tent, and I saw them. Drag marks, clear drag marks leading from the woods directly to the back of my tent, exactly where my head had been lying during the night. Forget this. I packed up my entire camp in record time and sprinted down the mountain, making it back to my car before 9 a.m. The drive home was dead silent. No music, no radio, nothing. I just kept replaying the night in my head, trying to come up with some logical explanation. Maybe it was a fox. No, foxes scream and squeal. They don't talk, and they definitely don't mimic your father's voice. When I got home, my parents immediately noticed something was wrong and asked me what happened. I told them everything. Thank God they believed me. The last thing I needed was for them to think I was insane. I've gone camping since then, but I made damn sure my father came with me.